Chapter 19. Brenda Wyatt was of course intrigued by Nash, alias MacLeod. Or was it MacLeod, alias Nash? And the reasons behind the decapitations and sword fights that were taking place on the New York streets. What she had not realized, and was not prepared to admit to herself, was the fact that she had more than a professional interest in the handsome antique dealer. She kept telling herself that the gory puzzle and the figures behind it were what attracted her inquiring mind. The Saturday after the fight on the construction site, Brenda went shopping and just happened to walk in the direction of Nash Antiques. After buying a few groceries and wandering around a large department store where the clothes were just what she wanted but not what she could afford, she found herself having coffee in a restaurant opposite the antique shop. She observed a few customers coming and going, and then finally the man himself arrived and went inside. She finished her coffee quickly, paid, and went across the street. There was nothing unusual about the facade of the place on Hudson Street. It was much like any other antique shop. If it was a front for some illegal activity, then it was a very successful one. She had witnessed several purchases over the last hour. And a front for what? Why do people kill each other? If it was a drugs racket, the goods being smuggled in with or in antiques, why settle disagreements with broadswords and ancient blades? Why not just bump each other off in the way gangland killings were usually managed? An accident or just a good old-fashioned bullet in the brain? Why all this reenacting of 18th century dueling? She imagined Nash saying something to her like, "We belong to an historical society, interested in the art of dueling with the sword. Only we like it to be authentic. We go all the way." She entered the shop and looked around. Nash was nowhere to be seen, but there was a woman sitting behind a desk, and she looked up. "Can I help you?" The woman was quite attractive for someone in her 40s, and Brenda felt an unreasonable flash of pique go through her. Was this woman personally involved with Nash? Then she kicked herself mentally for being so stupid. That was the kind of macho thought a man might have on seeing a perfectly innocent situation. She worked for Nash. That was all. "I'd like to speak to Russell Nash." The woman smiled. "I'm Rachel Ellenstein. Can I be of assistance?" "I'm sure I can. I'm sorry. I particularly wish to speak to Mr. Nash. Could you fetch him for me, please?" The telephone rang at that moment, and the woman called Rachel said, "Excuse me." She lifted the receiver and spoke briefly into the instrument before turning to Brenda again. "I'm afraid Mr. Nash is not here at the moment." "Oh yeah?" Brenda arched a brow. "Then who was that I saw walk in here a few moments ago? Perhaps it was a Mr. MacLeod?" Rachel looked a little startled and began to fiddle with some papers on her desk. "May I call Mr. Nash at home?" said Brenda, trying another tack. "I have to talk to him today." Rachel was a little red by this time, but she seemed to become less flustered after glancing towards the door at the rear of the shop. "Oh, I'm afraid that won't be possible." Brenda retorted, "No, I don't suppose it would be, since he's obviously in a back room somewhere." Just then, Nash stepped from behind a curtain and crossed the floor. "Good morning," he said. Rachel had flushed again. This is Brenda Wyatt, Mr. Nash." He nodded. We've already met, Rachel. I said you were out. That's what I asked you to say to visitors. He turned to Brenda again. I get all sorts of weirdos coming in here with junk they just think is worth $1 million. Rachel is my filter. You mustn't blame her for lying to you. She hates it. You can see that by her face. Brenda suddenly melted towards the other woman, seeing the need to block visitors as an unpleasant, if necessary, task. What can I do for you, anyway? He asked. She looked him straight in the eyes. I'd like some advice. Are you the sort of person who takes advice? She turned and picked up a figurine, an African statuette made of ebony. It was smooth and surprisingly light. She put it down again, aware that he was waiting for an answer. That depends. Was this game irritating him? It seemed to be. Advice about what? She drew a deep breath. What can you tell me about a 7-foot lunatic hacking away with a broadsword at 1 o'clock in the morning in New York City, 1985? Rachel, who had been standing listening all this while, suddenly gathered together some papers and walked to the far end of the shop. A customer had entered, and Brenda thought that no doubt she had blessed his arrival in order to get out of the embarrassing scene she was witnessing. Nash scratched his cheek. Not much, he said. You were there. It was probably some guy crazed on dope or something. Happens all the time. Only recently. All right, we'll skip that for the moment. What about a Japanese sword dated 600 BC? The metal in the blade folded 200 times. Ah, now we're talking antiques, he said. Can I show you something in 18th century silver? Brenda felt herself becoming annoyed. That's not why I came here, she hissed. And you know it. Do you cook? He asked. She moved back from him in surprise, and Rachel, now returned, gave her a little smile. Why? She asked. He said, I thought we might have dinner tonight. Did you? Yes. Her mind was working very fast. Should she trust him? The hell with that. He was mixed up in something very weird. She found him attractive, but that was no reason to trust his character. She would need some backup. Fine. I'd love to make us a meal. When? He named a day and time, which she agreed suited her. Then she left.